Just how thrifty was Alan Kulwicki? Jon Jeffords tells a story of how much of a shoestring budget the team had. All right, so how did you meet Alan?
Okay, so my father was a radio advertising salesman for all of his career. Never spent any time behind the microphone, but he would sell radio time. In 1978, he was working for WISN in Milwaukee, and their FM station changed from elevator music to album-oriented rock and roll. So again, he was in sales and promotions. So with the new rock and roll format, they had to come up with some ideas, brainstorm how are we going to advertise to the younger demographics. So they came up with a few ideas. One was to get a 1948 fire truck and paint it up with the call letters WLPX 97 FM. They had got a motorized hang glider gentleman to fly over Summerfest, fly over State Fair, advertise the call letters on the wings of the glider. And one of the people in the meeting was an administrative assistant named Marilyn Mee, whose boyfriend raced stock cars in the Metro Milwaukee, southeastern Wisconsin area. She also was going to college with him at UW Milwaukee. His name was Alan Kulwicki. So a sponsorship deal was made. And as a gopher for the radio station, I would attend a lot of the promotional events. This would have been the first summer of 1978. And Alan had his car painted up. That was a red car, beautiful pinstriping and the WLPX logo on the side. And as a race fan myself, and as someone who wanted to become an engineer, I couldn't resist but to ask Alan, hey, if you ever need some help, I'll be happy to give you a hand. So that was the start in the summer of '78. I was a gopher. I won't brag and say I was a pit crew member per se. It was more accurate description would be a gopher. And got to help out both in the garage and at tracks, mainly Slinger Speedway.
Oh, okay.
So I worked, that would have been my senior year in high school, 78, 79, and then went on to MSOE, was an engineering student at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, and helped Alan out in the summers. And with him being a degreed engineer, it was kind of nice to have a mentor like him to give me some tips relative to my budding engineering studies and career.
So what was the age difference between you and Alan then?
Oh, great question. Wow. I'll say he was probably 6 or 7 years older than I.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Can you tell me something about Alan that nobody else maybe doesn't know?
Yeah, so that's a tough question with all of the videos and the documentaries and the books that have been written. That's a very difficult question. This is probably known, but in his early days, keep in mind again, I knew him during his Slinger Speedway late model stock car. He just started dabbling, I think, in the ASA. In the 82 time frame. So this is long before any fame and glory of NASCAR. But from the early days that I got involved, it was a very thrifty race team. My first realization of this was when I put a cotter pin into, I think it was the front, after greasing the front wheel bearings, I bent over both tines of the cotter pin and immediately was corrected that now you only bend over one tine, and then when that one breaks off after so many uses, now you bend the second one. You double the life of a 6-cent cotter pin. And that was sort of the philosophy through the whole, everything that just very, very thrifty. Yeah. Save the money for the items that make the car go faster, like the tires and the engine. But be very, very thrifty with the other aspects of the preparation and hardware. So, but I think that's kind of known even carried through his NASCAR that he ran on a shoestring budget compared to all the other teams. They had to make every dollar count. And that apparently started with the cotter pins.
What do you think was Alan's favorite racetrack?
So that's an excellent question. I honestly can't answer that. Most of my time with him was in the garage at Slinger Speedway. I got up to Cayuga, Canada, a couple times. Milwaukee Mile, of course, that was sort of for a late model stock car racer. The Milwaukee Mile was probably the most prestigious track to race at for obvious reasons. That track goes back so long, and you had the likes of Parnelli Jones and Mario Andretti and AJ Foyt to run at the mile had to be exciting. But I honestly can't answer that. But we had how would you say, the effort and the dedication, whether it was the Milwaukee Mile or Hales Corner Speedway. The process was the same. The goal was the same. But if you find out the answer to that question, I'll be interested to know what some of the other guys might think.
Do you think he had a non-favorite by any chance? Like
a non-favorite?
Yeah, like a dislike racetrack.
No, I think his passion for racing was that what's that expression? A bad day at the racetrack is better than a day at work.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, worst day at work. No, how would that go? A bad day at the track is better than a good day at work. Yeah, he just just the passion around racing, the process, getting the car to the track, getting it set up. Going through during practice and qualifying, what's the car doing on that day at that temperature, all the adjustments, the between session adjustments to try to get the car to handle, just a laser focus. So regardless of what track it was
the same.
He just went at it 100%.
I gotcha. Other than racing, what did Alan enjoy doing?
Yeah, that was another good question I saw on the list. And again, I'd struggle with that one. My time with him was either at the track or in the garage. On occasion, since he and my father had initially had a business relationship with the sponsorship, that later became a casual personal relationship. So we spent a couple of Christmas Eves with Alan. Yeah, kind of an eclectic guy. I don't remember any other passions other than obviously racing. But yeah, very tough question. Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that one properly, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
How do you think Alan knew so much about the race car, shock-wise, chassis-wise, engine-wise, things like that?
Yeah, so he got off to a good early start with his go-kart racing efforts. Raced primarily in Dousman, Wisconsin, at the Badger Kart Club.
Okay.
So obviously, the dynamics of hustling a go-kart around a sprint car. I think Dousman was 0.6 of a mile. Lots of cornering, 1.5 straightaways. But that was a great beginning. And then, of course, his engineering studies was the foundation of how a race car handles the physics, the dynamics, chemistry. So, although the engineering degree might have held him back from racing a little bit, in the end, it helped him get a little farther, a little faster, with knowing the foundations of the math and science behind a race car. And then he did. Maybe here's an answer. Maybe most people don't realize he did actually, after getting his engineering degree, he did work as an engineer briefly before giving it up for racing. But he designed an automotive chassis alignment system for car alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as you mentioned, there's so many variables involved with the setup of a race car: caster, camber, toe, ride height, spring rates, shock valving, shock displacement, all the variables that you have to juggle. How does the car handle on the entry of the corner? How does it handle at the apex? How does it handle at the exit? He had just a great ability to juggle all those variables that go into setup and get them dialed in for his driving technique, for the track conditions, for the tire conditions, were these 1 heat cycle tires, were these 20 heat cycle tires, and just had an internal microprocessor that could crunch all of these variables. And we never knew when he hopped out of the car what tweak now. Always tweaking, always changing to try to dial it in for that specific day and that track. Yeah, very. I've heard Paul Andrews make the same comment on some interviews with him, that he just had this internal processor that he could put all these variables into. Most people think the average race fan thinks there's this one magic setup for the car for all these variables, but it's really all about what does the driver's technique need to make that car fast. And obviously that's where Alan could shine. He could get that car dialed in.
And it's crazy, to think about how good of a race car driver he was, but also how good of a crew chief he was. You know what I mean? So, like you said, he can juggle all those things together and just, make such a good race car driver, because all those things, impacted his racing life and made him better. Because nowadays, I don't know who you would compare to that someone can do all that and still drive the wheels off of it and be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll to answer your question, I'll say with the engineering degree, probably definitely was having an engineering mindset. Of course, us engineers are kind of different.
Yeah.
And that did not hurt him in any way with relative to setup of a race car. How to make a race car go fast based on how he drove it.
Mm-hmm. If Alan were here today, where do you think he would be in the racing world?
Wow, good question. I would think he would definitely still kept his own team. Everybody's aware of the stories about him turning down opportunities to go to bigger teams because he had so much invested in his own team. So if I had in my mind, I would have loved to seen him as a multi-car owner, kind of like a Roger Penske, where he'd be at the helm and have one or two or maybe three cars underneath him. And then, of course, hands-on day-to-day involvement with the team and driver development.
Yep. Okay. Do you remember the day Alan died in the plane crash, and what were your thoughts about hearing it?
Yeah, I do. My brother's birthday is actually April 1st, and obviously April Fool's Day. And with the early initial reports, you're always hoping that early reports always tend to be very inaccurate, and you're just hoping that it was that the plane had a rough landing in a cornfield and that everybody walked away. But unfortunately, the early reports were true that there were no survivors. But the thing that flashed in my mind, here's a guy who lived, ate, and breathed racing to get himself, to be the local late model champion in southeastern Wisconsin, then try to be an ASA champion, then what would it have been back then? Busch Grand National, working all these stair steps to getting to the top. Then finally, after several years of trying, he gets the golden ring in the most unbelievable race If anyone hasn't watched the last race of the 1992 season in Atlanta, there were 6 drivers, I think, who had a mathematical chance of winning. And he, here's another. You talked about what might people not know. I think it was exiting the pits on the very first pit stop. Alan exploded his first gear. First gear came apart, and now he's got gear pieces lying in the bottom of the transmission. So now he has to hope to get through the rest of the race without any of those parts getting stirred up and locking up the transmission. So just this unbelievable race with Bill Elliott and the other 4 drivers that had a chance, and to win it, to be so victorious in such great odds at such a low budget, and then to not be the cruelty of not being able to defend that in 1993 because of the plane crash. That was probably the one thought in my mind, was how cruel this was, that he finally got there against all odds, got the Winston Cup championship, and then just a short period later, gone.
Yeah. What do you think your greatest memory of Alan was?
Oh boy, greatest memory. Yeah. Definitely the as a NASCAR driver, definitely the Winston Cup championship. Just getting in a position to win it, to be there, to be in the last race and have a shot at it is just an incredible accomplishment for a Wisconsin racer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then to actually win it. So from a professional aspect, watching him on television, obviously, was the Winston Cup championship. Looking back at the when he was still local, and I was giving him a helping hand. It just what I would say that at that time it was just his perseverance. Just no matter how bad he crashed at Slinger Speedway or Hales Corners or Kaukauna, never give up. Just perseverance, keep going. That sticks in my mind. Is there were several times where I thought, well, that's it. He's got no money left. The season's only half over. We'll probably call it quits here. And then the next day, the phone's ringing. Hey, can you come to the shop tonight? We're gonna rebuild it.
Crazy on how he did it. He did it his own way, and it's just special. It really is. You don't see that nowadays. So it's just cool.
Yeah. Things are so much more sophisticated now. Much bigger teams, much more resources. But that was a special time where, with skill sets like that, and you could do the impossible.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, there still is ways around it to make big things happen like that. But the way he did it, it'll probably never be done ever again. So I mean, it's just cool to hear all these stories about him and how he did it and what he went through to do it all. And that's what I like about these calls is I kind of, I wasn't in that time zone of him racing. And, it's hard to find content or, even hear stories of him racing and how he did it. So I love hearing it, how he did it in his ways and things like that. And like before, your memories with him, that's what's special to me is I get to hear those and it's a really cool thing. It really is. But
I mentioned too, I enjoyed it as a budding engineer. It was fantastic to see how do you measure caster, camber, and toe, and ride heights, and all the documentation, notebook after notebook of setup sheets, and then of course in the evening after the race, what was the result of this new pan hard rod adjustment, and how did the car handle? What was the result of that? Almost trial and error. Just always trying to find a couple extra tenths.
Yeah. but no, I really appreciate you for, hopping on the call at this time of night. I'm sure you probably want to go home pretty soon. So I appreciate it.